Julian Miller. The name echoed through the conference room on the 40th floor, as if someone had just shattered tempered glass in the sterile silence of Vance Co. Maya felt her spine stiffen instantly. The Chicago air conditioning, always set to something close to morgue temperature, suddenly felt useless against the heat rising up her neck. She didn't look at the investors in front of her. She didn't look at the charts projected onto the glass wall showing the company's expansion into sustainable technology. Her eyes, almost magnetically and recklessly, went straight to the head of the table. Elena Vance didn't move. She sat with the posture of someone who held not only controlling shares of the company, but control over the very oxygen in the room. The metal pen between her long, immaculately manicured fingers stopped spinning. Her gaze, gray, so deep it was often compared to the steel beams holding up the city, locked onto Maya with surgical precision. It wasn't just professional irritation. It was something heavier, a silent promise of an interrogation that wouldn't use words, only the crushing weight of her presence. The consultant from Miller Holdings, one of the investors, continued, ignoring the minefield he had just stepped into, suggests Maya's terms should be reconsidered. He believes the risk projection has been underestimated. Maya tasted the metallic edge of anxiety in her mouth. She knew Julian. She knew his tone, the way he used condescension to mask insecurity, and most of all, how much he loved putting his name on other people's work, especially hers. But here, under Elena Vance's scrutiny, Julian Miller was nothing more than an inconvenient ghost Maya had sworn she'd left behind. Underestimated, Elena's voice finally cut through the room. It wasn't loud, but it had the texture of velvet wrapped around blades. She tilted her head slightly, the movement letting a strand of her dark hair fall perfectly over the shoulder of her tailored blazer. Maya Thorne doesn't underestimate risk. She dissects it. If Mr. Miller believes there's an error, he's welcome to bring his own data instead of sending messages through intermediaries. The investor cleared his throat, uneasy, but Maya couldn't look away from her boss. Elena wasn't defending her out of loyalty or kindness. There was something possessive in it, something that made Maya's heart slam against her ribs in a way that had nothing to do with fear of being fired. It was the look, the deadly one, the one Elena reserved for when someone touched something she considered exclusively hers. And over the past few months, between 3 a.m., coffees and contract revisions that demanded an almost unbearable physical proximity, the line between professional and personal had become dangerously blurred. "The meeting is over," Elena declared, rising with the predatory elegance that had made her a legend in Chicago's Loop. "Maya, my office. Now." The conference room emptied quickly, employees leaving like they were escaping an impact zone. Maya lingered for a second, closing her laptop with hands that insisted on trembling. She knew that walking through that frosted glass door wouldn't just mean facing an irritated boss. It meant facing the woman who knew her sleep patterns, the brand of tea she preferred when stressed, and the exact way she bit her lower lip when hiding the truth. When Maya stepped into the main office, the late afternoon Chicago sun reflected off the surrounding skyscrapers, casting a mix of shadows and golden light that framed Elena perfectly. She stood with her back turned, arms crossed, staring at the horizon. The silence was thick. Maya could hear the faint hum of the computer on the oak desk. "Julian Miller," Elena said slowly, as if tasting something bitter. She turned, the sunset light sharpening the firm lines of her face. "That's an interesting name to show up in a $10 million contract, Maya, especially when it belongs to the man who, according to records I shouldn't have read, but did, was the reason for your abrupt move from Seattle. Elena, that has nothing to do with the project." Maya tried to keep her voice steady, but using her first name, a breach of protocol reserved only for when they were alone, betrayed her vulnerability. "I didn't know Miller Holdings was involved, I swear." Elena walked toward her. Each step of her heels echoed across the marble floor like a verdict. She stopped at a distance that was technically professional, but emotionally invasive. The scent of sandalwood and something citrus, Elena's signature, wrapped around Maya, making her senses falter. "The problem isn't the project, Maya. The project is paper and ink." Elena lowered her voice, and the deadly look softened into something darker, hungrier. "The problem is the way you went pale, the way your hands started shaking the second his name was mentioned." She leaned in slightly. "Why does he still have that power over you?" "He doesn't have any power," Maya whispered, feeling Elena's proximity like an electric charge. "It was just surprise, that's all." Liar. Elena took another step, closing the distance to almost nothing. She lifted her hand, not to touch, but to adjust the collar of Maya's silk blouse. The gesture lingered longer than necessary. Her fingers brushed the warm skin of Maya's neck, and the contact stole the air from Maya's lungs. You don't know how to lie to me. You never have. And I won't accept ghosts from your past interfering with what we're building here. What we're building in the company? Maya asked, her voice faltering, her eyes fixed on Elena's lips. Elena leaned in just a little more, enough for Maya to feel the warmth of her breath. Her gaze was no longer lethal, but something else entirely. Something possessive, absolute, unapologetic. You know I'm not talking about the company, Maya. Elena's whisper was cut off by the persistent ringing of the desk phone. Neither of them moved. The outside world, with its loud traffic and neon lights, seemed to have stopped existing. Sometimes being part of a space that understands these silent tensions is the only way to process what we feel but can't say, as if every story were a mirror reflecting emotions we keep locked away. Maya swallowed hard, feeling the weight of the silence that followed. She wanted to step back. She wanted to regain her professional composure, but her feet felt rooted to the floor. Elena finally removed her hand from Maya's collar, but didn't step away. Her eyes kept mapping Maya's face, searching for every subtle reaction, every sign that Julian Miller was, in fact, just a ghost, and not a real threat to the territory Elena had been marking with such patience and intensity. Tomorrow we have the final round with the investors, Elena said, her voice returning to command mode, though the light in her eyes remained personal. And Mr. Miller will be there in person. She took a measured breath. I want you flawless. Not just in your numbers, but in your posture. He needs to understand you're not the same woman he knew in Seattle. You belong to this office. You belong to this team. Maya felt the impact of that word. Belong. She knew that coming from Elena Vance, it carried layers Julian would never be able to understand. I'll be there, Maya replied, finally finding her voice, though it still sounded slightly hoarse. I won't disappoint you. Elena gave a minimal smile, almost imperceptible. It didn't reach her eyes, but softened the corner of her mouth. You never do, Maya. You just worry me, and I hate worrying about things I should have under absolute control. She turned and walked back to her desk, sitting with the authority of a queen reclaiming her throne. The lethal gaze was back, but now directed at the documents in front of her, as if she were already planning the destruction of anyone who dared destabilize the delicate balance between them. Maya left the office knowing the real chaos hadn't even begun yet, and that tomorrow's meeting would be far more than a business negotiation. The coffee was cold, but Maya didn't care. She stared at the non-existent steam rising from the white ceramic mug as the Chicago sun tried, unsuccessfully, to cut through the thick fog rolling in from Lake Michigan on that Tuesday morning. In the minimalist West Loop apartment, silence was broken only by the distant metallic grind of the elevated train, the L, a few blocks away. Maya felt the weight of Julian Miller on her shoulders like a backpack full of stones she thought she'd left behind at a train station 2 years ago. She stood in front of the bathroom mirror, adjusting the collar of her cream silk shirt, her fingers still tingling slightly. It's just a meeting, she told herself, but her reflection didn't seem convinced. There was a faint shadow under her eyes that no concealer could fully erase, a mark of a restless night replaying every conversation, every mistake, every moment she had let Julian make her feel small in Seattle. But this wasn't Seattle. And here, she wasn't alone. Although Elena Vance's presence was, in itself, a different kind of danger, when she arrived at Vance Co, the air felt heavier, charged with the static electricity that comes before a major snowstorm. In the marble lobby, the sound of her own footsteps echoed, sharp, precise, an attempt to project confidence her insides refused to support. She stepped into the private elevator and, for a brief second, wished the cable would snap, just to delay the inevitable. When the doors opened on the 40th floor, the scent of expensive espresso and industrial cleaning products hit her. Elena was already there. She always was. Her boss stood beside the secretary's desk, flipping through a report with restrained impatience, revealed only in the rhythmic tapping of her index finger against the leather cover. Elena wore a graphite gray suit that looked like armor, her hair pulled into a tight bun so precise it seemed nothing, not even a hurricane, could loosen a single strand. When Elena lifted her eyes and met Maya's, the world around them blurred. There was no good morning. Elena didn't waste time on pleasantries when there was blood in the water. "You're 3 minutes late," Elena said, her voice low, almost a purr, as she walked toward her private office, signaling for Maya to follow. "And you didn't have coffee. Your step is heavier." "I had coffee at home," Maya lied, closing the heavy door behind her. The click of the lock sounded like the beginning of an interrogation. "Then you had the wrong coffee," Elena replied, turning and setting the report down on the glass desk, before approaching Maya with that familiar invasion of space. She reached out, and with a gentleness that sharply contrasted her tone, tucked a loose strand of Maya's hair behind her ear. Elena's fingers, cool yet firm, made Maya hold her breath. "Your pupils are dilated. Are you afraid of him? Or afraid of how I'm going to react when he walks through that door?" "I'm not afraid of anyone, Elena," Maya replied, forcing herself to hold her gaze, even as heat crept up her cheeks. "Julian is the past. A statistical error in my trajectory. That's all." "Statistical errors don't make a woman like you lose sleep, Maya," Elena murmured, tilting her head, her gray eyes scanning Maya's face as if reading source code. She took a step back, but the tension remained in the air, vibrating like a violin string stretched to its limit. "I had Miller Holdings thoroughly investigated over the last 12 hours. Julian Miller is an opportunist with an ego bigger than his portfolio. He's going to try to use what he knows, or what he thinks he knows, about you to destabilize me. He believes you're my weak point." "Am I?" The question slipped from Maya's lips before she could stop it. The silence that followed was almost painful. Elena didn't answer right away. She walked to the built-in coffee machine, poured a cup of black coffee, and handed it to Maya. "Drink. You need focus," Elena said, ignoring the question. But the way her fingers brushed Maya's as she passed the cup was a far more eloquent answer than any words. She held Maya's gaze. "Julian Miller is going to learn today that no one uses anything against what belongs to me. And you, Maya." She paused, her eyes gleaming with an intensity that bordered on possessive. "You are the best analyst this company has ever had. Don't let a ghost from Seattle dim the light you built here." The intercom rang, slicing through the moment like a blade. The secretary's voice announced that the representatives from Miller Holdings had arrived and were waiting. Maya felt a knot tighten in her stomach, but Elena's gaze, now cold and focused like a sniper's, gave her a strange kind of courage. They walked out together. The contrast between Elena's rigid authority and Maya's contained vulnerability drew the attention of everyone in the office. When they entered the main conference room, Maya saw Julian. He stood with his back to the door, admiring the view of the Willis Tower. When he turned, that same condescending smile Maya despised was already in place on his perfectly shaved face. "Maya, you're still wearing that vanilla perfume," Julian said, stepping forward as if to embrace her, completely ignoring Elena's presence. "Chicago seems to have been good to you, though you look a little more tired than I remember." Maya felt the instinct to step back, but before she could move, she felt Elena's hand settle firmly at the base of her back. It was support, and a warning, a territorial mark. "Mr. Miller," Elena's voice cut through the air, cold and commanding. She didn't extend her hand. "I'm Elena Vance, and this is my office. I suggest you save your personal reminiscing for lunch, if Maya is willing to waste her time on you. Now, sit down. We have numbers to discuss, and my time is considerably more valuable than yours." Julian faltered for a fraction of a second. His smile weakened under Elena's lethal gaze. He sat, trying to recover his composure, but Maya noticed how he avoided looking directly at Elena. The meeting began with veiled aggression. Julian tried to interrupt Maya at every slide, questioning profit margins, and suggesting her risk analysis was too emotional. Each interruption was an attempt to diminish her, to remind her of a hierarchy he still believed existed. But every time he attacked, Elena intervened. Surgical precision. She dismantled his arguments with crushing logic and refined sarcasm, leaving him increasingly cornered. "What you call emotional, I call market intuition backed by data you clearly weren't capable of processing," Elena said, closing the folder with a sharp sound that echoed through the room. She leaned forward over the table, eyes locked on Julian. "Maya Thorne built this projection on her own. If you can't keep up with her pace, perhaps Miller Holdings should withdraw from the consortium before embarrassing itself further." Julian turned red, a vein pulsing in his neck. He looked at Maya, searching for weakness, but found none, only composure, and Elena's eyes watching every inch of his reaction. "Maya, you're not going to say anything?" Julian snapped, his voice rising. "After everything we've been through, you're going to let this woman talk to me like that?" Maya looked at him, and for the first time in years, she felt nothing. No guilt, no inadequacy, just a deep exhaustion for having let someone so small take up so much space in her mind. She turned to Elena, who was waiting for her response, tension tightening her jaw as she held herself back from ending Julian's career right there. Maya spoke, calm, sharp as ice. "Whatever we went through, Julian, ended the moment I left Seattle. Here, you're just a consultant with flawed data. And Elena is right. If you can't be professional, the exit is the same door you came through." Silence. Absolute. Julian opened his mouth to respond, but Elena's lethal gaze, now carrying the promise of total destruction, shut him down. He gathered his things with stiff, clumsy movements and walked out without looking back. When the door closed, Maya felt as if she had finally released the breath she'd been holding for 2 years. She sat down, her legs slightly unsteady, her heart pounding hard against her chest. Elena remained standing, watching the door for a few seconds before turning back to Maya. The ice mask of the boss didn't fully crack, but something in her posture softened. She walked over and stopped beside Maya, placing a hand on the analyst's shoulder. The warmth of the touch seeped through the fabric of her shirt, sending a wave of calm and something else through Maya's body. "He's not coming back," Elena said quietly, almost to herself. "No one disrespects what matters to me and walks away untouched." Maya looked up, meeting Elena's gaze. The proximity was dangerous. The subtext between them was now a scream. The silence of the conference room could no longer contain. Elena didn't remove her hand. Her fingers began tracing a slow, almost imperceptible movement along Maya's shoulder, a gesture of comfort that quickly shifted into something heavier, charged with a need they had both been trying to bury under the guise of corporate productivity. The silence that settled over the room after Julian's abrupt exit felt suffocating. Maya had the strange sensation that the ceiling was slowly pressing down on her. The sound of Elena's heels against the marble, as she stepped away from the table to lock the door, cracked through the silence like a whip. Outside, the world kept moving with indifferent urgency. The lights along Michigan Avenue flickered beneath the fine drizzle that blurred the windows, turning Chicago into an impressionist painting of smeared lights and deep shadows. Maya remained seated, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, her knuckles pale from the pressure. She could still feel the heat of Elena's body on her shoulder, a thermal imprint that refused to fade. Elena didn't return to her leather chair. She stopped by the glass wall, watching Maya's reflection in its translucent surface. Her gaze was fixed, predatory, but carrying a melancholy she rarely allowed to surface. "Did he used to touch you like that?" Elena's question came stripped of any professional tone. It belonged to shadows, not boardrooms. She turned, leaning against the cold glass, hands tucked into the pockets of her immaculate suit. "Like you were something he could claim just by being in the same room? Like your mind was just an accessory to his ego?" Maya exhaled, shaky, looking down at the now-forgotten coffee cup. "Julian never understood what it meant to share a space, Elena. He only understands occupation. He believes that if he's present, the rest of the world has to bend to his gravity. In Seattle, I let him. I was younger, and he had this way of making you believe he was the only path to success." She paused. "But that was a long time ago. It doesn't look like that long ago when I see your pulse racing." Elena stepped forward, the distance between them tightening like a pulled string. "You're the most resilient person I've ever met, Maya. I've watched you dismantle multinational CEOs with a spreadsheet and a half smile. But when he mentioned your perfume, I saw a crack in your armor." Her voice lowered. "And I hate cracks, especially the ones I didn't help create." Elena moved closer, close enough for Maya to feel the shift in the air. She extended her hand, but didn't touch Maya's face. Instead, her long fingers traced the edge of the table, stopping just millimeters from Maya's hands. Silence returned, now filled only with their breathing. Maya's, short, hesitant. Elena's, deep, controlled. The scent of sandalwood and rain that clung to Elena was intoxicating, a fragrance that seemed meant to be experienced only at that dangerous distance. A shiver ran down Maya's spine, a sudden irrational urge to lean forward, to close that tiny space that seemed to hold all the tension in the room. "Why are you defending me like this?" Maya whispered, finally lifting her eyes to meet the storm gray of Elena's gaze. "You don't do this for anyone. You fired the marketing director last month for something much smaller than what Julian tried to pull today." "The marketing director was replaceable," Elena replied, leaning in slightly, her face now just inches from Maya's. The corridor light, filtered through the frosted glass door, cast a soft glow around her silhouette. "And you know perfectly well that whatever exists between us, since that night at the gallery, has nothing to do with anything replaceable." Her voice dropped. "You're not a resource, Maya. You are—" She paused, lips slightly parted, as if weighing the risk of the next word. "You are my greatest misjudgment, a beat, and at the same time, the only reason I want to come to this office every day." Maya felt her heart skip. The subtext they had been building for months, through lingering glances, accidental touches, late-night messages about strategy that had nothing to do with work, was finally becoming text. The tension in the room was physical, pressure in the ears, heat on the skin that had nothing to do with the heating system. Elena lifted her hand to Maya's chin, raising it with a softness that bordered on reverence. Elena's thumb brushed against Maya's lower lip, and the gesture, brief as it was, carried the weight of 1,000 unspoken confessions. "Elena, we can't," Maya said, her voice slipping out like a protest her body clearly didn't support. "The board, the project. If Julian finds out anything, he'll destroy us. He's vindictive. Let him try," Elena murmured, her voice vibrating against Maya's skin. "Let the whole world try. I spent 20 years building this empire so I could have the right to choose exactly who I want by my side." Her gaze locked onto Maya's. "And I choose you. In every meeting, every business dinner, and especially now, when no one is watching us except the lights of Chicago." Elena didn't pull back. If anything, she moved closer. Her hand slid from Maya's chin to the back of her neck, fingers threading into the short, silky strands of her hair. The pull was subtle, but the command was unmistakable. Maya closed her eyes, feeling the world tilt. Desire, that same desire she had buried under spreadsheets and black coffee, rose like an unstoppable tide. She felt Elena's lips brush against her cheek, a touch that promised everything and asked for nothing, a trail of heat that made the cold air in the room feel like dry ice. "You have no idea how long I've waited for this," Maya whispered, her hand finally rising to grasp Elena's wrist, not to push her away, but to make sure she wouldn't go anywhere. "How afraid I was that it was all in my head." "It never was just in your head," Elena replied against her ear, her warm breath sending shockwaves through Maya's body. "But I needed you to see who Julian really was, so you could understand who I am." A pause. "I'm not a safe harbor, Maya. I'm the storm." Her grip tightened slightly. "But I'm your storm." The physical proximity was now absolute. Elena's suit brushed against Maya's silk, the friction of fabric the only sound besides the wind howling beyond the double-glass windows. Time seemed suspended, a denial of every corporate rule, every fear, every consequence. Maya felt the heat of Elena's skin, the restrained strength in her arms, and the vulnerability radiating from the woman everyone believed was made of steel. The unspoken desire between them was now a silent scream, a magnetic force pulling them toward an abyss neither of them seemed willing to escape. Elena pulled back just enough to look into Maya's eyes one last time, before sealing whatever this was. There was a challenge in her gaze, a question that didn't need words. "Do you have the courage to burn the world with me?" Maya didn't answer with words. She answered by tightening her fingers around Elena's wrist. Surrender. Possession. But just as the moment became inevitable, footsteps in the hallway, fast, urgent, and a sharp knock against the frosted glass door forced them apart. "Ms. Vance." The secretary's voice carried panic. "Mr. Miller is on the phone. He says if you don't take the call right now, he'll leak the restructuring details to the press." He said, "Maya isn't the only one with secrets." Elena snapped back into place in a second. The cold mask returned as if it had never left. She adjusted her blazer, her eyes now burning with renewed fury. Maya, still breathless, tried to smooth her blouse and steady her breathing, tasting adrenaline and frustration on her tongue. The moment had been interrupted, but now it had teeth, and Julian Miller had just made the mistake of trying to blackmail a woman who had nothing to lose. except the one person she had just decided to protect. "Tell him this," Elena said, her voice steady, controlled, lethal. "If he leaks a single line of that report, I won't just sue him. I'll buy every debt Miller Holdings carries and dismantle his legacy brick by brick before sunrise." Her voice didn't shake. She didn't raise it, but the silence that followed was louder than any explosion. She ended the call with a slow, almost ceremonial motion, and remained standing with her back to Maya. Outside, the rain had turned into a heavy gray curtain, transforming the skyscrapers into ghost-like silhouettes. The glow of the monitors cast bluish shadows across Elena's skin, highlighting the rigid tension in her shoulders. Maya, still seated, felt each breath scrape through her lungs like ground glass. The heat of the moment before, the almost kiss, the whispered confession, had been swept away by a cold front of corporate reality and blackmail. "He's not going to stop, Elena," Maya said, her voice small in the vastness of glass and steel. "Julian, he's like a cornered animal. He doesn't just want the numbers. He wants control. He wants to feel like he can still hurt me." Elena turned. The lethal gaze was still there, but now there was something else. Fatigue, the kind she rarely let the world see. She walked to the desk, grabbed her leather folder, and began organizing documents with almost obsessive precision. Her movements were sharp, the sound of paper against leather unnaturally loud. "He won't hurt you, because he won't get the chance," Elena said, stopping with her hands pressed against the desk, staring into nothing. "But he's right about one thing. Miller Holdings still has partial access to a segment of the Seattle server I haven't fully locked down yet. A beat. If there's anything there, anything he can twist about your departure, it could contaminate tomorrow's board vote." Maya stood, her knee trembling slightly. She walked toward Elena and stopped 2 steps away. The space between them, once an invitation, now felt like a minefield. Maya could see the crease of concern between Elena's brows, the way she pressed her lips together. "There's nothing there, Elena. Nothing but a confidentiality agreement I signed so I could leave in peace. But he'll make something up. He'll say I stole data, that I..." Maya cut herself off, her throat tightening. "I can't let him destroy what you've built. Maybe it's better if I step away until this is resolved." Elena's eyes snapped up instantly. The fury that flashed there was so intense, Maya took an involuntary step back. "Step away?" Elena moved around the desk, closing the distance with a speed that left no room for escape. "You think I did all of this today, that I faced that man and that I..." She hesitated, her voice dropping into something dangerously intimate. "That I let you in here, into my most private space, just to let you walk away at the first threat? It's your empire." "Elena!" Maya burst out, her hands lifting in frustration before falling uselessly at her sides. "I'm just a piece. And when a piece is damaged, you replace it. That's how you work. That's what everyone says about you. Then everyone knows nothing," Elena whispered. She reached out and grabbed Maya's wrist, not forcefully, but with an urgency that felt almost like a plea. Her fingers were warm against Maya's cool skin. "I'm not a machine, Maya, no matter how hard I tried to be all these years. And you are not a piece." Her voice softened. "You are the only thing that makes this building feel like something other than a glass tomb." Silence settled again. In the hallway, the distant rattle of a cleaning cart and the murmur of employees leaving were the only reminders that life outside continued. Inside, time felt worn down, eroded by hours of tension. Sometimes, we find ourselves loving someone with no guarantee the ground won't disappear beneath us the next second. A risk we take for a connection that words can't contain. If these stories speak to something you keep hidden inside, subscribe so we can keep sharing these silences together. Maya looked at Elena's hand around her wrist, then up at her face. She saw the vulnerability Elena tried to hide beneath command. She saw fear, not of Julian, not of the board, but of losing whatever was growing between them. "We're tired, Elena," Maya said, her voice breaking. "We're exhausted from fighting ghosts, and from fighting ourselves." "I know," Elena murmured, stepping closer until their foreheads touched. The scent of rain and exhaustion was all Maya could process. "But I'm not going to let Julian Miller win. Not the board. Not your doubt." Elena released Maya's wrist, only to wrap an arm around her waist, pulling her into an embrace that had nothing to do with romance in the traditional sense. It was the embrace of survivors. Maya buried her face in Elena's shoulder, feeling the expensive fabric of the blazer against her cheek. She felt Elena's hands tighten against her back, a silent promise of protection that went beyond any contract or title. "What are we going to do?" Maya asked against her neck. "What I always do," Elena replied, her voice regaining that steel cadence. "I'll move before they do. I'm calling an emergency meeting at 8 in the morning. Before Julian can send a single email, a beat. We'll lay everything out. The contract, his harassment, everything. And if they don't believe us?" Maya pulled back slightly to look at her. "They will believe me," Elena said, with a confidence that bordered on arrogance. But in that moment was Maya's only anchor. "Because I'm a Vance, and no one calls me a liar on my own ground." Elena brushed a strand of hair from Maya's face, her fingers lingering against her cheek. The touch was soft, almost contradictory to the hardness of her words. For a moment, the tension returned, but now it carried something else. Melancholy. The sense that they were moving toward a breaking point with no return. "Go home, Maya," Elena said softly. "Try to sleep. I'll stay here and prepare the files." I'm not leaving you here alone to do my work," Maya protested, but Elena placed a finger against her lips, silencing her. "It's not your work. It's our future." A pause. "And I need you clear-headed tomorrow. I need your mind, Maya." Her gaze softened. "And I need you to trust me." Maya nodded, even with the sense of looming disaster still lodged in her chest. She gathered her things and walked to the door. Before leaving, she looked back. Elena was already seated at her desk, the glow of the monitor reflecting across her face, her silhouette powerful and solitary against the darkness of the city, the image of a woman willing to burn everything, to protect one thing. The elevator descended in silence. When Maya stepped into the lobby, the cold Chicago night hit her like a slap. She walked to the curb, looking for a taxi, feeling strangely light and unbearably heavy at the same time. Julian Miller thought he had a winning move, but he didn't know Elena Vance, and he certainly didn't understand what happens when a woman who never had anything to lose finally finds something worth fighting for. However, as she got into the car and watched the city lights blur across the rain-streaked window, Maya couldn't shake the feeling that even if they won tomorrow, something between them had already worn down beyond repair. The weight of the secret, the pressure of the blackmail, the forced closeness born from danger. It had created a crack, and cracks, in glass buildings, tend to spread silently until everything collapses. "You shouldn't be here, Maya. If anyone sees us right now, the entire plan falls apart." Elena Vance's voice no longer carried the velvet of the night before. It was dry, rough, like tires grinding over frozen Chicago gravel. She didn't look up from the monitor, where columns of financial data and audit logs glowed in a ghostly blue, reflecting in her tired eyes. The office, once a refuge of shared tension and unspoken promises, now felt like an isolation chamber. The air conditioning hummed quietly, but the cold Maya felt came from within, a frost slowly spreading over everything they had tried to build. Maya stood at the doorway, gripping her bag so tightly her knuckles throbbed. "I brought the Seattle files you asked for. I couldn't stay home waiting for the phone to ring," she said, her voice faltering at the end. She stepped forward, but Elena's look stopped her like a physical wall. "Leave them on the desk and go, Maya. Now." The command was sharp, final, no room for argument. Elena leaned back in her chair, and Maya noticed the deep shadows under her eyes. Her hair, usually flawless, had loose strands escaping. Her blazer was tossed over the leather couch. There was a distance between them that went beyond physical space. It was strategic, protective. Elena was closing herself off, raising the drawbridges of her empire, and Maya was being left outside, in the cold, as if she had never held the keys. Maya walked slowly to the desk and placed the folder down. Elena's scent, sandalwood and strong coffee, still lingered, but now it felt like a memory of someone already gone. "You're pushing me away," Maya said. Not a question, a statement. Her stomach tightened. Julian sent something, didn't he? What did he say? Elena let out a bitter laugh, devoid of humor. She stood and walked toward the glass wall. Outside, Chicago pulsed like a network of glowing veins beneath the dark skin of the night. "He doesn't need to say anything, Maya. He just needs to exist." A pause. The board received an anonymous complaint. Improper conduct. Conflict of interest. They're questioning why I defended your risk analysis so aggressively, knowing you have a personal history with the opposing consultant. Improper conduct? Maya felt the blood drain from her face. We didn't do anything, Elena. Yesterday was the first time It doesn't matter what we did or didn't do. Elena cut in sharply, turning around. What matters is perception. Her voice hardened. And right now, the perception is that I am emotionally involved with a subordinate, which makes the entire expansion project vulnerable to legal action. A beat. To save the contract. And your career. I need you not to exist to me outside of technical meetings. The word exist echoed like a death sentence. Maya felt a single tear burn down her cheek. She wiped it away quickly. She wouldn't show weakness. Not here. Not in front of the woman she loved, who was now treating her like a financial liability. The emotional distance hurt more than anything Julian had ever done. It was the loss of something Maya had finally believed was real. So, that's it? She asked, her voice trembling. You decide for both of us? You erase me from your life to save a portfolio? Elena stepped closer. For a second, the mask cracked. She stopped inches away, her body radiating heat that cruelly contradicted the coldness of her words. She reached out. Her thumb brushed Maya's cheek where the tear had been. The touch was electric, desperate, a living contradiction. Her fingers trembled slightly. I'm trying to save you, you idiot, Elena whispered, her voice suddenly rough. If I fall, you fall with me, and I won't let Julian take you from me again, even if that means losing you for a while. For a while usually turns into forever in this building, Elena, Maya replied, closing her eyes, leaning into her touch. The need to be held, to be protected, and to protect her back. It was physical, painful. I'd rather fight beside you and lose everything than stay safe and lose you. Elena pulled her hand back abruptly, as if burned. She stepped away. The armor snapped back into place with terrifying speed. I'm not a martyr, Maya, and you're not a romance heroine. You're a market analyst. Her tone turned sharp again. Act like one. Take the service elevator. I don't want to see you here until the 8 o'clock meeting. The words hit hard, heavy, final. Silence followed. Only the rain against the glass filled the room, a steady, melancholic rhythm. Maya looked at Elena one last time, searching, for hesitation, for a crack, for anything. But Elena had already turned back to the monitor, her fingers moving across the keyboard with ruthless efficiency. Maya turned and walked toward the door. Each step seemed to require a Herculean effort, as if she were walking against a wind of 100 kilometers per hour. As she stepped into the empty hallway, the fluorescent lighting felt unbearably bright, exposing her loneliness. The elevator arrived with a metallic chime. Inside, surrounded by mirrors, Maya saw the reflection of a woman who had just lost something she had never fully had. The pain wasn't sharp. It was constant, a dead weight at the center of her existence. She thought of Julian, of the victorious smile he was probably wearing right now, and felt a surge of pure hatred that made her shiver. But hatred was a weak fuel compared to the longing already beginning to consume her. Getting home was worse. The West Loop apartment, once her sanctuary, now felt like nothing more than cold walls and lifeless furniture. She sat on the couch without turning on the lights. The darkness suited her better. She picked up her phone. The screen was empty. No notifications. The urge hit her instantly. To text Elena. Anything. I miss you. I'm sorry. Don't leave me. But she knew Elena wouldn't respond. Elena was at war, and in Elena Vance's war, feelings were ammunition the enemy could use. Maya lay on the bed, still fully dressed, staring at the ceiling. The distant rumble of the L train was the only sound in the Chicago night. She felt adrift, like a satellite that had lost its orbit. The love she felt for Elena, once a form of liberation, now felt like an anchor pulling her under. And the worst part wasn't Julian, or the risk of losing her job. The worst part was realizing that Elena, in trying to protect her, was destroying the very thing that made that protection necessary. At 3 a.m, her phone vibrated on the nightstand. Her heart jumped. With trembling hands, she grabbed it. Not a message from Elena. An official company email. From legal. Dear Ms. Thorne, we inform you that your participation in the 8 a.m. meeting with Miller Holdings has been canceled by directive of the executive office. You are to remain working from home until further notice. pending instructions regarding the internal audit process. Maya let the phone fall onto the sheets. The exclusion was official. Elena had removed her from the battlefield. Protection had become isolation. What had been a feeling was now corporate policy. Maya closed her eyes, the silence of Chicago pressing down on her, and for the first time, she wondered if loving Elena Vance meant losing herself entirely. The chipped porcelain cup trembled in Maya's hand as the deafening roar of the L train passing Morgan Street Station rattled the windows of her loft. 6:15 a.m. Chicago's sky wasn't blue. It wasn't gray. It was a dense sheet of lead pressing down on the skyline. Maya sat on the kitchen floor, her back against the cold refrigerator door, surrounded by printed documents and a laptop on the verge of dying. She hadn't slept. The email Elena sent at 3 a.m. still burned in her mind like a brand. Removed, protected, excluded. The words blurred into resentment and longing. But within the Seattle files she had brought, she found something. An inconsistency. Julian Miller wasn't just a blackmailer. He was desperate. He had manipulated Miller Holdings' losses to secure Vance Co's investment. He had nothing on her, only fear. Fear that she, the only person who truly understood his methods, would uncover the black hole in his accounts. The intercom buzzed, sharp, intrusive. Maya flinched, spilling cold coffee onto her sweatpants. She walked to the screen, her heart pounding. On the grainy black and white display, a familiar silhouette stood in the rain, shoulders slightly hunched beneath a dark coat. Elena. Maya unlocked the door without a word. The minutes it took Elena to reach the loft felt like hours. When the door finally opened, the scent of rain and sandalwood filled the space, along with everything that had been left unresolved. Elena stepped inside, but stopped in the entryway. She looked exhausted. The lethal gaze was still there, but worn, edges softened, like someone who had spent the night fighting the world for one person. "I told you to stay home," Elena said, her voice so low it nearly disappeared beneath the rain on the metal roof. "I said I would handle it. And I told you I'm not a piece you can lock away when things get dangerous." Maya shot back, stepping closer. She didn't care about her messy hair or swollen eyes. "Why are you here, Elena? The board meets in less than 2 hours. If anyone saw your car outside, let them see." Elena cut her off. She moved closer, urgent, closer than Maya had ever seen her. She stopped just inches away, her warmth cutting through the cold of the loft. "I couldn't finish the files, Maya. I sat at that desk, and all I could see was the way you looked at me before you left. A breath. I realized something." Her voice softened. "I can win this fight. I can destroy Julian. But if I do it the way I always have, alone," she swallowed, "I lose you in the process." Her eyes locked onto Maya's. "And I realized that's a price I'm no longer willing to pay." Maya felt her throat tighten. She reached out and touched the lapel of Elena's rain-soaked coat, her fingers tracing the outline of the expensive fabric. "Did you come to give up?" "I came to get you," Elena whispered, her hand sliding up to cradle the back of Maya's neck, her rain-chilled fingers contrasting against the warmth of her skin. "We're walking into that room together. If Julian wants a scandal, he'll get one." Her eyes hardened. "But not the one he's expecting." A pause. "We're going to expose his fraud, and after that, the board can go to hell." "Elena, you could lose the presidency," Maya warned, though her eyes had already betrayed her, sinking into Elena's deep gray. "I've lost far more important things trying to be the woman everyone expected me to be." Elena rested her forehead against Maya's, their breaths blending into the same rhythm. "I spent years building walls, Maya. Walls so high I couldn't even see the sun anymore." Her voice softened. "And then you showed up, with your numbers, your stubbornness, and that perfume that makes me forget my own name." She exhaled slowly. "I'm not going to let Julian Miller be the reason you leave my life again." Elena's touch changed. It was no longer support. It was a silent claim. Her thumb slid along Maya's jaw, stopping at the corner of her lips, an invitation that didn't need words. Maya closed her eyes, feeling the tension of the past days dissolve under that contact. The desire they had buried beneath spreadsheets and board meetings was now gravitational, unavoidable. Maya pulled Elena closer, gripping her coat, feeling the structure of the woman who controlled half of Chicago unravel in her arms. "I found something," Maya whispered against Elena's lips. "In the Seattle report, he diverted funds, Elena. Julian has nothing on me, because he's too busy trying not to go to prison. Elena let out a breath that was half laugh, half relief. She pulled back just enough to look at Maya, pride flashing across her face. You're brilliant. I always knew. The closeness between them had changed. It was no longer urgency. It was alliance. Elena's hand slid along Maya's side, light, but charged, making goosebumps rise along her skin. The silk of Maya's clothing was thin, every inch of Elena's palm unmistakable against her ribs. Go get dressed, Elena ordered, but her tone carried a soft complicity. Wear the navy suit, the one that makes you look like you're about to buy the city. A faint smile. We have a meeting to destroy. Maya smiled, her first real smile in days. She walked toward the bedroom, but paused at the door and looked back. Elena stood there in the middle of her modest living room, surrounded by books and plants, completely out of place, and yet exactly where she belonged. Elena. Yes? When this is over, what happens to us? Elena walked toward her, stopping at the threshold. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she leaned in and pressed a soft, lingering kiss to Maya's forehead. A gesture that carried more permanence than any signed contract. When this is over, Elena murmured against her skin, we're going to find out what life looks like when we're not running from ghosts. A breath. And I think you're going to like the answer. Sometimes redemption doesn't come from a perfect ending, but from the courage to face chaos hand in hand with the one who makes you feel alive. If you see yourself in that courage to begin again, subscribe so you don't miss how this story ends. Maya dressed with military precision, navy suit, impeccable hair, lipstick like armor. When she returned, Elena was already on the phone, her commanding voice back. But when she saw Maya, she paused, her eyes scanning her with an admiration that wasn't even remotely professional. We're ready, Elena said, ending the call. They rode down in silence. In Elena's car, the drive into the loop felt like a silent countdown. Chicago was waking under the rain, traffic lights reflecting on wet asphalt. When they arrived at Vance Co, employees looked on in surprise as Maya walked beside Elena, not behind her, but shoulder to shoulder. The suspension had been ignored. At the conference room doors, the voices of investors and Julian Miller's confident laugh echoed from inside. Elena stopped for a moment, adjusting her blazer. She looked at Maya and extended her hand. Maya took it. A brief touch, palm against palm, a silent pact. Ready? Elena asked, her lethal gaze now fixed on the oak doors. More than ever, Maya replied. Elena pushed the double doors open with force. Julian's voice cut off mid-sentence. The room froze. Julian went pale when he saw Maya standing there, holding the folder that contained his downfall. Chaos was about to begin. But this time, Maya wasn't afraid. She felt the warmth of Elena beside her, a force no scandal, no blackmail could shake. Their lives were about to change irreversibly, and for the first time, Maya knew she was exactly where she was meant to be. Julian, sit down. Now. Elena Vance's voice didn't rise even a single decibel, but it hit like a steel door slamming shut. Inside the Vance and Co conference room, the silence was so absolute. Maya could hear the steady ticking of one of the investors' wristwatches. The air was thick with the scent of expensive coffee, and the ozone of the storm still raging outside. Julian Miller stood at the center of the room, his smile beginning to wilt like a flower planted in toxic soil. He looked from Elena to Maya, searching for fear, for hesitation, the same weakness he had always used as leverage. But Maya didn't look away. She still felt the warmth of Elena's hand against hers, a transfer of strength that seemed to have recalibrated her entire spine. I was simply explaining to the board the ethical complications of her hiring, Elena, Julian said, his voice wavering as he adjusted his silk tie, trying to regain control. Seattle was a complicated chapter for Maya. I just wanted to ensure the expansion wouldn't be compromised by misconduct. The only contamination here, Mr. Miller, is your presence, Elena replied, moving to the head of the table with the elegance of a predator that already knows its prey has nowhere left to run. She didn't sit. She leaned forward, palms flat against the glass, gray eyes locked onto him. Maya, please show them what misconduct actually looks like. Maya opened the leather folder. Her hands didn't tremble. She slid copies of Miller Holdings' audit reports across the table, stopping them directly in front of the three main shareholders. She saw the exact moment Julian realized what those papers were. The blood drained from his face, leaving him with a gray tone that matched the Chicago sky. "Mr. Miller didn't come here to protect Vance Co," Maya began, her voice clear, steady, filling every corner of the room. "He came because Miller Holdings is under federal investigation for pension fund embezzlement in Seattle." A pause. "He needed this contract to cover the losses before the annual audit was completed. The secret he tried to use to blackmail me wasn't about me." Her gaze hardened. "It was the fact that I'm the only one who knows where he hid the original books." Silence. Heavy. Absolute. Broken only by Julian's uneven breathing. One of the investors, a white-haired man who rarely spoke, picked up the documents, put on his glasses, and began flipping through them. The dry click of his tongue sounded like a verdict. "This is criminal," he murmured. "It's attempted fraud against this board," Elena added, her voice once again velvet over blades. She looked at Julian, who now seemed to shrink inside his own suit. "You thought you could walk into my company and use one of my best employees as a shield for your incompetence? You thought I wouldn't protect what is mine. Elena, He didn't finish. Elena's lethal gaze silenced him instantly. "Leave. One word. Final. Security is already downstairs with your belongings. If you attempt to contact anyone in this building, or if Maya Thorne's name is mentioned in any context other than professional excellence, a beat. I'll personally ensure that the federal investigation in Seattle becomes the least of your problems." Julian didn't say another word. He gathered what was left of his dignity and walked out under the board's contemptuous stares. Maya felt the weight of years lift from her shoulders. For the first time, the air in Chicago felt easy to breathe. But it wasn't over. The investors were still watching Elena, waiting for the real question, the weight of truth. "Gentlemen." Elena spoke before anyone could bring up ethics. She turned toward the board, but for a fraction of a second, her eyes found Maya's, a silent connection that said everything corporate rules forbade. "The company restructuring will proceed. Maya Thorne will lead the European expansion as vice president of strategy." A pause. Calculated. Deliberate. "As for the insinuations of improper conduct," Elena walked to Maya's side, and in front of the men who held the financial power of her empire, she placed her hand on Maya's shoulder. Possessive. Definitive. Not a boss-to-employee gesture. A claim. "I don't usually discuss my private life with the board, unless it affects profits." Her gaze sharpened. "And as you've just seen, my conduct just saved this company from a $10 million fraud." Silence. Again. Any other questions? None came. Elena didn't wait for validation. She simply gestured for Maya, and they walked out, together. Their footsteps echoed in sync through the marble hallway, until they reached Elena's private office. The door closed, the lock clicked, and for the first time, the armor fell. Elena leaned back against the door, closing her eyes, releasing a breath that felt like it had been held for decades. Maya stood in the center of the room, watching her. The daylight, now breaking through the clouds, illuminated Elena's face, revealing the exhaustion, the vulnerability, the woman behind the steel. "It's over," Maya whispered, tears finally blurring her vision. "It's over," Elena repeated, opening her eyes. She walked toward her, not stopping at a professional distance this time. She cupped Maya's face with both hands, her thumbs tracing the tears now falling freely. "He will never touch you again. He will never make you feel small again." "You risked everything, Elena," Maya said, covering Elena's hands with her own. "The board, your position. Why?" Maya asked. "Because an empire is worthless if you're alone in it, Maya," Elena replied, her voice rough with emotion. She rested her forehead against Maya's, the scent of sandalwood and rain now blending with the warmth of their skin. "I spent my whole life winning battles, but with you, I finally feel like I've won the war." The tension that had followed them for months, hidden beneath productivity and power, shifted into something deeper. Elena leaned in and closed the space between them with a kiss that wasn't a question, but an answer. It began soft, careful, a quiet discovery of breath and lips, but quickly deepened, intense, full of the hunger of someone who had spent too long in the desert. Maya gripped Elena's blazer, feeling the strength of her arms around her waist, pulling her into the only place she had ever truly felt safe. What remains? Hours later, as night settled over Chicago in neon light and distant traffic murmurs, Elena and Maya sat together on the leather couch in the office, watching the skyline. The rain had stopped, leaving only reflections of light on the glass. Elena rested her head on Maya's shoulder, barefoot now, her gray suit undone, softened. "They're going to talk," Maya said quietly, watching the movement along Michigan Avenue. "The office, the business press, everyone will have a theory about us. Let them talk," Elena replied, taking Maya's hand and intertwining their fingers, feeling the weight and warmth of that connection. "I spent 20 years controlling the narrative of who people think I am." A small exhale. "I'm tired of being a success story, Maya. I just want to be myself. A beat. With you." Maya smiled, feeling a peace she had never known in Seattle, not even in her first months in Chicago. She realized something. A happy ending wasn't the absence of problems. The board would still be difficult, the restructuring exhausting. Julian might still try one last desperate move. A happy ending was this: when the world started screaming again tomorrow, she wouldn't have to face it alone. "Do you think we'll make it?" Maya asked, squeezing Elena's hand. Elena lifted her head and looked at her. There was a softness there the board would never see, a quiet hope stronger than any strategy. She didn't answer with promises. Instead, she leaned in and kissed the corner of Maya's mouth, a small human gesture that said everything. "I think," Elena whispered, "we've already done the hardest part." A breath. "The rest, we'll decide over breakfast." Maya laughed softly, feeling Elena's warmth against her. They stayed there for a long time, in silence, but not the kind that used to exist between them. Before, it was tension. Now, it was permanence. Outside, Chicago kept moving, loud, indifferent. But inside, on the 40th floor, time had slowed. Elena stood slowly and extended her hand. Not a command, an invitation. Maya took it and stood, ready to leave the office, the building, and everyone's expectations behind. As they walked toward the door, Elena paused, glancing at the oak desk where the reports still lay scattered. She didn't organize them. She simply turned off the lights. City light flooded in through the windows, painting golden silhouettes across the floor. Maya looked at Elena and saw the woman behind the legend. Someone who had made mistakes, who had been afraid, who chose to stay. And maybe, in the end, that's what love really is. The courage to turn off the stage lights and see who's still there in the dark, holding your hand when the applause is gone. The elevator descended. When the doors opened into the empty lobby, they stepped into the cool Chicago night. They walked to Elena's car. Before getting in, Maya paused and looked up at the top of the Vance encumbered building. It seemed smaller now, less threatening. "What are you thinking?" Elena asked, opening the door for her. "That I came here running from a name," Maya replied, getting in, watching Elena take the wheel with a calmer expression, and ended up finding a home. Elena smiled, started the engine. The car glided through the wet streets. The story stopped being told there, but the silence they shared on the way home, that was the beginning of something no risk analysis could ever predict. What would tomorrow bring? Another fight? Unexpected peace? Maybe both. But as they crossed the bridge over the Chicago River, Maya looked at Elena's profile and knew, for the first time in her life, she wasn't in a hurry to get anywhere. The radio played something soft, almost imperceptible. Elena reached over, resting her hand on Maya's knee. A steady touch. An anchor. They didn't need perfect endings. They just needed permanence. And there, beneath the lights of a city that never sleeps, the silence between them finally said everything that needed to be said. And if tomorrow brings new challenges, who knows what they'll be capable of building, now that there's nothing left to hide. The silence of Lake Michigan on a Sunday morning is nothing like the clinical cold of the Loop offices. In Lake Forest, about an hour from Chicago, the dominant sound isn't the metallic screech of the elevated train or the constant hum of data servers, but the rhythmic, almost hypnotic sound of gray water lapping against an old wooden pier. Maya stood on the balcony of Elena's country house, her fingers wrapped around a ceramic mug releasing the rich scent of coffee with cinnamon. The morning cold cut through the silk of her robe, but she didn't move. Her eyes were fixed on the horizon, where sky and water blended into an indistinguishable mist. For the first time in years, the weight in her chest wasn't anxiety or fear. It was something heavier, something solid. It was the feeling of ground beneath her feet. The glass door behind her slid open with a soft, almost imperceptible sound. Maya didn't need to turn to know who it was. The scent of sandalwood, now mixed with the faint trace of an extinguished fireplace and the crisp lake breeze, announced Elena's presence before Maya even felt the warmth of her body behind her. Elena wasn't wearing the graphite gray suit or the perfectly tailored blazer that had once served as her armor at Vance Co. She wore an oversized wool sweater in a soft cream tone that softened the sharp lines of her face. Her hair, once always pinned into a precise bun, fell freely over her shoulders in dark waves. "You're going to catch a cold," Elena said, her voice a low, rough whisper, stripped of corporate authority but filled with a concern that still felt new, unfamiliar to both of them. "The wind here is merciless this time of year." "I like the cold," Maya replied, her knee trembling slightly as Elena placed her hands on her shoulders, squeezing gently. "It makes me feel awake. After everything that happened, I feel like I spent the last 2 years sleepwalking." Elena's hands slid from Maya's shoulders down her arms until they found her cold fingers wrapped around the mug. She enclosed them with her own. Her warmth was enough, the only contrast needed against the cold morning. The closeness was absolute. Maya could feel Elena's breath against the curve of her neck, a calm rhythm that stood in stark contrast to the storm they had faced just 4 days earlier in that conference room. Julian Miller was now nothing more than a footnote in financial news, a name tied to fraud, federal investigations, running parallel to the meteoric rise of Vance Co.'s stock. "The lawyer called," Elena murmured, resting her chin on Maya's shoulder. "The Seattle confidentiality agreement has officially been voided by the court. Julian has nothing left, Maya." A pause. Not the data, not a voice, not the power to make you look back. Maya exhaled slowly, the steam from her coffee dissolving into the mist. She turned in Elena's arms, now facing the woman who had risked an empire just to keep her from falling. Under the pale morning light, Elena looked human. There were faint lines of exhaustion around her gray eyes. The barely visible scar near her eyebrow stood out more without the shield of professional makeup. "And the board?" Maya asked, lifting her hand to brush away a strand of Elena's hair that the wind insisted on pulling loose. "They won't forget what you said in that room. The improper conduct. Let them remember." Elena gave a small smile, the kind that never made it to press conferences. She caught Maya's wrist, stopping her hand from pulling away, and pressed it gently against her own cheek. Maya's heart skipped. The quarterly profits will silence any cheap moralizing. And if they don't, a slight tilt of her head. "I own the building, Maya. I can change the tenants whenever the furniture starts to bother me." Maya laughed softly, feeling the last traces of tension finally dissolve from her body. "You're impossible." "I'm efficient," Elena corrected, her voice lowering, deepening. Her eyes traced Maya's face slowly, carefully, like she was memorizing every detail, now that secrecy was no longer a burden, but a choice. "And I've decided that my efficiency is now dedicated to making sure you never feel like you need to run again." A breath. From anything. Or anyone. The silence that followed was no longer the silence of Chicago, filled with expectations and judgment. It was shared. A language they were learning to speak without words. Elena leaned in. Her breath brushed Maya's lips before she kissed her, not with urgency, not with desperation, not like that night in the loft, not like the almost goodbye in the conference room. This was something else, a kiss of permanence, calm, deep, carrying the taste of coffee and the warmth of a fire still burning between them. Maya felt Elena's hands tighten around her waist, pulling her closer until there was no space left for the lake forest wind to pass between them. Sometimes, we spend our whole lives building walls to protect ourselves, without realizing what we truly need is someone brave enough to climb over them and meet us on the other side. If this journey of rediscovering love and trust touched you, subscribe so more stories like this can find their way to your heart. Maya pulled back just enough to look into Elena's eyes. "We're really going to do this, aren't we? The vice presidency, the expansion, us. We already are," Elena replied, her fingers tracing the outline of Maya's lips, a gesture soft with long-term promise. "Tomorrow we go back to the city, back to the suits, The charts, the power struggles, a small pause. But when the lights on the 40th floor go out, Maya, this is where we come back. Her gaze softened. Or anywhere the world can't reach us. Elena took the mug from Maya's hands and set it down on the balcony floor. She took both of Maya's hands and guided her back inside the house, where the warmth of the heater and the scent of burning wood wrapped around them like an embrace. The living room, with its floor-to-ceiling windows facing the lake, was bathed in amber light. There were no secrets there. No cameras. No Julian. No judgment from Chicago. There were only two women who had learned that the greatest corporate victory of their lives hadn't been the $10 million contract, but the courage to be imperfect in front of each other. Maya sat down on the linen sofa, and Elena lay with her head in Maya's lap, a gesture of surrender Maya had never imagined seeing from the queen of the loop. Maya began running her fingers through Elena's hair, feeling the softness beneath her touch. Elena closed her eyes, releasing a quiet sigh of contentment that made Maya's chest overflow. "You know," Elena murmured, almost drifting to sleep under Maya's touch. Julian was right about one thing. "What?" Maya asked, leaning down to kiss her temple. "Your vanilla perfume." Elena opened one eye, a playful spark crossing the gray. "It really does distract people from the numbers." A small pause. "But he forgot to mention, it's the only thing that makes me want to keep counting." Maya smiled, feeling peace settle deep into her bones. Their life wouldn't be easy. There would be headlines, tension with the board, days when Elena's ego or Maya's insecurities would try to take control again. But as the sun finally broke through the fog over the lake, filling the room with a golden, honest light, Maya understood something. The chaos of Chicago no longer had power over them. They had built something that couldn't be audited, couldn't be sold, couldn't be destroyed. The story that had begun with a whispered name and a lethal glance in a boardroom now ended in a shared, domestic silence. Maya looked at their intertwined hands resting over Elena's sweater and realized a happy ending wasn't a final period. It was an ellipsis. The first day of a life where they didn't have to be analysts or CEOs. They could simply be human. The fire in the fireplace crackled, sending one last spark into the air before settling into glowing embers. Elena was already asleep, her breathing slow and steady against Maya's leg. Outside, Lake Michigan continued its eternal rhythm against the pier. But for Maya, the world had finally gone still, and for the first time in her life, she had no desire to move. Their lives would continue now, far from public eyes, written in small gestures, in quiet moments, in the understanding that love isn't an asset to be managed, but a freedom to be lived. Maya closed her eyes too, letting the sound of water and the warmth of Elena carry her into a rest she hadn't known was possible. Tomorrow's meeting could wait. The future could wait. That morning in Lake Forest, the present was everything. The last paragraph of a story is never the end of what the characters live. It's simply the moment we stop watching them, but knowing they continue there, taking care of each other in the silence of the night. That's what remains. Maya adjusted the blanket over Elena's shoulders and looked out at the horizon one last time. The fog had completely lifted. The path ahead was clear, and for the first time, she knew exactly where she was going.